They say hospitals are places for healing, but for Jessa, it became the front lines of a war she didn't start. She was lying in bed, barely stitched together, her ribs throbbing, her wrist wrapped, her skin still reeking of antiseptic, when the door flew open like a grenade blast. Her father. No flowers, no concern, no question like, "Are you okay?" Just one sentence shouted like a threat. "Pay rent or get out." Jessa's eyes fluttered open. Her voice came out like sandpaper. No. That one word, barely whispered, ignited something primal in him. The slap came so fast she didn't see it, only felt it. The sting, the sound, the blood in her mouth as her body pitched off the hospital bed and hit the cold tile floor. Her stitches pulled, her ribs screamed. But nothing hurt more than the realization he came not as a father, but as a debt collector. "You think you're too good for this family?" The words didn't just hurt, they burned. He stood over Jessa, his shadow long and unrelenting under the hospital lights. She couldn't speak, not because she didn't want to, but because every time she tried to breathe, her ribs screamed. Every breath was a war. She looked up at him, the man who had once called her "my little girl," now glaring like she was a stranger who owed him money. It wasn't the first time. This slap may have happened today. But the violence, the control, the emotional debt she was always being forced to repay, that began years ago, back when she was 16 and dared to apply for a college scholarship on her own. Back when she was 19 and turned down her father's safe job offer to study nursing instead. Back when she was 25 and decided to keep Danny even after the father disappeared. Each time he'd say the same thing: "Don't forget who feeds you. Don't bite the hand that raised you. You live under my roof, you owe me." It had never been love. It had always been leverage. And now, even lying there bruised, bleeding, aching, he still looked at her like a burden that never paid up. And suddenly, Jessa realized something. This wasn't about family. It never had been. This was about ownership, control, and the myth that children must endlessly repay the debts of being born. Jessa didn't move back home because she wanted to. She moved back because life left her no choice. The clinic had cut her hours. The landlord raised the rent again. And no matter how many shifts she picked up, the math just didn't work anymore. She needed a roof over her daughter's head. Danny was 6, small, curious, breathing through an inhaler most nights. So Jessa swallowed her pride, packed their lives into 4 boxes, and rang the doorbell she swore she'd never touch again. Her father opened the door with a grunt, not a smile. "Just temporary," he muttered, "until you get back on your feet." Jessa nodded. But the moment she stepped into that house, the stale air, the creaky hallway, the same peeling paint from 10 years ago, she knew the truth. Nothing about this was going to be temporary. It started small. A snide comment here, a sarcastic joke there. Then the bills started showing up. "Since you're using the most hot water, you'll cover that. And the Wi-Fi too, you're on your laptop all the time. And gas, you drive more than us." She paid quietly, even when it meant skipping her own doctor appointments, even when Danny's inhaler ran low and she couldn't afford the refill right away. Every payment felt like another chain tightening. And slowly, painfully, Jessa realized she hadn't come home. She'd walked straight back into captivity. Eric was still living at home, still jobless, still treated like royalty. Every day, Jessa came home from back-to-back shifts at the hospital, exhausted, sore, barely holding it together. And every time, there he was, lying on the couch, gaming headset on, legs stretched out like he owned the place. Uber Eats boxes piled up around him, half-empty energy drinks, the TV blaring. When she asked where the money came from, he shrugged. "Just used your card. Dad said it was fine. You'll get paid Friday anyway, right?" Jessa froze. No apology, no guilt, just the assumption that her paycheck belonged to them. Then came the credit card bill, $2,000, all on some scammy online crypto mentorship course. When Jessa refused to pay, her father growled from across the room. "Don't act like you can't afford it. You're working double shifts," she whispered. "I'm saving for Danny's asthma meds." His jaw clenched. Then came the words that would haunt her for weeks. "What's more important, her lungs or your brother's future?" Jessa didn't answer. She couldn't, because that wasn't a question. That was a declaration. Her sacrifices were expected, and her child's well-being, optional. Even Danny noticed. She no longer hummed while brushing her teeth. She clutched her bunny tighter, and one night, as they sat together in silence, she whispered, "Mommy, why does Grandpa only talk nice when you give him money?" It was raining that night, the kind of slow, steady rain that blurred headlights and masked red lights. Jessa had just finished another double shift at the hospital. 12 hours. No break, no food, just adrenaline, coffee, and obligation. Her fingers ached from charting. Her back throbbed. But what hurt the most was knowing she'd go home only to be treated like a burden. She blinked too long at a red light. A truck turned across her lane. She never even hit the brakes. The impact sent the car spinning. Metal tore, glass shattered, and then silence. When Jessa opened her eyes, she was on a stretcher, blinding lights above her, a paramedic calling her name. Her lips cracked. One word escaped. Danny. She didn't ask about herself. She asked if her daughter was safe. The doctor said she was lucky. 6 stitches in her side, a sprained wrist, deep bruising, but alive. She was barely conscious the next morning when the door opened again. She thought maybe it was a nurse, maybe Megan, maybe, God willing, just someone who cared. But it was him, her father. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask how she was feeling. He didn't even bring a bottle of water. He just barked, "Pay rent or get out." Before she could reply, his hand flew. The pain in her ribs was nothing compared to the sting on her face, the bleeding in her mouth, the dull echo of her body hitting the hospital floor. And in that frozen moment, lying between the antiseptic tiles and a heart monitor's beep, Jessa saw the truth clearly for the first time. The crash didn't break her, but her father's slap woke her up. For a moment, Jessa didn't move. She lay there on the cold tile, pain pulsing through her ribs, her jaw, her pride. The sterile beeping of the monitor was the only thing keeping her anchored. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, she just breathed. Shallow, quiet. But underneath that silence, something was cracking. She thought of Danny, 6 years old, big brown eyes. Still too young to understand betrayal, but not too young to feel it. Jessa imagined her daughter growing up in this same cycle, where pain wore the mask of family, where love meant control, where silence was survival. No, not for her daughter, not anymore. Jessa pulled herself up slowly. Her palms slipped against the cold floor, her fingers trembling, but she forced her body upright. Each breath sliced through her side, but she welcomed it, because now she wasn't just in pain, she was awake. She sat back on the edge of the hospital bed, blood still on her lips, and looked at the door her father had slammed shut moments ago, and she whispered, this time not out of fear, but from resolve, "This ends here. Not tomorrow, not next week, now." The moment his hand hit her face, something deeper hit back. A lifetime of swallowed rage, of unpaid sacrifices, of being told to smile while breaking inside. Now it was her turn to rewrite the story. 3 days after the hospital, Jessa still hadn't told anyone what had happened. Not about the accident, not about the slap, not about the slap, now burning inside her chest. She just existed, moving through each hour like fog, until Megan showed up at the door. her best friend since nursing school, the only person who'd ever seen Jessa cry and not flinch. She brought groceries, a soft blanket, and eyes that saw through the silence. "Why didn't you answer my calls?" Megan asked gently. Jessa opened her mouth, but instead of words, tears came first. Everything poured out. The rent, Eric, the manipulation, the slap, the fear in Danny's eyes. Megan listened without a single interruption, then reached into her purse and pulled out something small, old, brass, and worn. A key. "Your mom gave me this," she said softly, right before she passed. She said to give it to you when things got too heavy to carry alone. That night, Jessa sat with the key in her palm for hours. It was heavy for something so small. There was a tiny M etched near the base. M for Monroe. M for Mom. M for maybe. She thought, maybe this is what I've been waiting for. The next morning, she dropped Danny at school, made a thermos of tea, and drove to the one place she hadn't visited in years, her mother's house. It stood quietly at the corner of Ash and Hamilton, porch slightly tilted, wind chimes still swaying like they had during childhood summers. The door creaked open. Inside smelled like lavender and old paper. Her mother's rocking chair was still in the corner. A half-finished quilt hung over the armrest. Dust danced in golden beams of light. Jessa wandered room to room like she was walking through a memory. Nothing looked secret, nothing looked powerful, until she reached the bedroom. There, tucked in the back of the closet, was a metal filing cabinet. Locked, always locked. She pulled out the key. Her fingers trembled. Quick! The drawer slid open with a soft metallic groan. And there it was. Inside the drawer were 3 items: a notarized letter, a property deed, and a small folded handwritten note yellowed but untouched by time. Jessa reached for the handwritten one first, her mother's handwriting, loopy, soft. Familiar, like a lullaby she hadn't heard in years. She unfolded it slowly, her hands trembling. "If you're reading this, it means you've endured far more than I ever wanted for you. They will take everything if you let them, but you were never meant to carry their weight. This house is yours now. Use it. Protect Danny. And never let guilt be the leash that binds you. Love, Mom." Jess's vision blurred. She clutched the letter to her chest as if it were a life raft. Then the second document. A notarized legal letter naming her, Jessa Monroe, as the sole beneficiary of her grandfather's estate, and the third, the official deed to the very house she currently lived in, signed, stamped, filed under her name, not her father's, not shared, hers. Jessa collapsed onto the floor, not from pain, but from the weight of truth finally landing where it belonged. All this time, she had been paying rent, in a house that legally belonged to her. The manipulation, the emotional blackmail, the guilt trips, all built on a lie. And her mother had seen it coming. She hadn't just left a house, she'd left a map, a final act of love carefully tucked away for the moment her daughter would need it most. And now, that moment had come. Jessa didn't explode. She didn't scream, didn't throw things, didn't announce war. She prepared. Because when someone spends their life being controlled, manipulated, and silenced, they learn how to move quietly, but with purpose. Every night after Danny fell asleep, Jessa became someone else. Not a nurse, not a daughter, not a victim. She became a strategist. She started with the easy things, utility bills all in her name, bank transfers showing she covered every expense, Venmo payments with Eric's smug notes, "Thanks, sis." Then came the live stream. Eric on Twitch laughing, "Nah, man, I don't pay anything. Sis covers it all. Perks of being the baby, right?" Jessa screen recorded every second. And then, the video. A neighbor, Leah, showed up one evening, phone in hand, voice trembling. I wasn't sure when to give you this, but I think you need it now. It was a security clip from the hospital. The slap, the scream, Jessa collapsing, and Danny in the corner screaming, "Mommy!" She had been there. Jessa never even knew. Her knees buckled, but this time she didn't fall. She took a breath, saved the file, then called the same attorney who handled her mother's estate. "I'm not doing this out of anger," she said, setting the folder on his desk. The lawyer raised an eyebrow. "Then why now?" Jessa looked him in the eye. "Because I'm done paying for silence." 2 days after Jessa filed the eviction papers, the whispers began. First, it was Mrs. Val from across the street. She stood by the mailbox, arms folded, judgment thick in her voice. "Heard you're throwing your sick father out into the street. Shame on you." Jessa froze. "Sick?" Val's face twisted. "He said you won't even drive him to his lung appointments. Said you won't help him with his meds." Jessa didn't respond. She couldn't, because there were no lung appointments, no medications, just a lie. That evening, she returned home to find her father lounging dramatically on the couch, tissue in hand, fake wheezing loud enough for the neighbors to hear through the walls. Eric had vanished, likely online spinning his own sob story to his Twitch audience about how his heartless sister was throwing out her own family. The guilt campaign had begun, and Jessa was the villain in their carefully crafted play. But she wasn't alone. One night, the doorbell rang. It was Leah from 3 houses down. She didn't say hello, she just held up her phone. "Hey, I think you need to see this." On her screen was the hospital footage, the slap, the fall, Danny screaming. Leah whispered, "I work part-time in that wing. I saved this before it got wiped from the system." Jessa's hand shook as she took the phone. Proof. Unfiltered, undeniable. Leah looked her in the eye. "If he pulls anything else, you won't be alone." And just like that, the story shifted. Jessa wasn't just fighting shadows anymore. She had truth on her side. The sun wasn't up yet when Jessa woke. The house was quiet, but not peaceful, just waiting. She brewed coffee like it was any other day. The scent filled the kitchen. She sipped slowly, letting the heat settle her nerves. But inside, her thoughts moved like fire. Today was the day. Her father walked in, rubbing his jaw like he owned the morning. He didn't even look at her. "Where's the rent?" he asked flatly, as if it were a greeting. Jessa set her mug down. "I'm not paying rent anymore." He stopped mid-step, turned slowly, eyes narrowing. "What did you just say?" She met his eyes, calm, unshaken. "I said no, again." At first, he laughed dry and mean. "This about the hospital? You think I owe you for that? You wouldn't even be alive without this roof over your head." Jessa didn't flinch. "You mean the roof I own?" she said, quiet but clear. That did it. The flicker in his eyes, panic, disbelief, then rage. He stepped forward, towering. Eric appeared behind him, bleary-eyed, shirtless, holding a bowl of cereal like it was a shield. "What's going on?" he muttered. "She's saying she owns the house now," their father spat. "You believe this crap?" Eric scoffed. "Please, she couldn't manage an apartment lease, let alone." Jessa cut him off. "The only reason you've had heat, Wi-Fi, and Uber Eats is because I paid for everything, every single time." His smirk vanished. Her father lunged closer. "This is still my house. I built this life. You don't get to take that from me." Jessa reached calmly into her folder, pulled out the deed, the trust documents, tax records, all in her name. Then the flash drive set gently on the table. "You didn't build this, Dad. Mom's father did, and she gave it to me quietly because she knew you'd do exactly this." Silence. Thick. Heavy. He blinked, then switched tactics, voice soft, falsely sweet. "You're really going to kick your own family out after everything we've done for you?" Jessa didn't hesitate. "I'm not evicting family," she said. "I'm evicting abuse." Friday morning came, cool, still, too still. Jessa woke before dawn, nerves buzzing in her chest like electricity. Danny still slept on the couch, curled with Bunny under her chin. Jessa kissed her daughter's forehead and whispered, "Today's the day." She stood at the front steps, folder in one hand, justice in the other. At exactly 9 a.m., a county deputy pulled up to the curb, clipboard in hand, face unreadable. Across the street, Leah stepped out onto her porch, phone in hand, ready. Mrs. Val peeked through her curtains. The neighborhood was watching. And inside, her father was pacing, face red, fists clenched. Eric stood by the window, hoodie half-zipped, mumbling under his breath. When the deputy knocked, her father stormed to the door. "You're letting her throw her sick father into the street. You should be arresting her." The deputy didn't flinch. "Mr. Monroe, this is a lawful eviction. You've been served. Today is the deadline." Eric shouted. "You think anyone's going to believe you? You're just bitter, selfish." Jessa calmly held up the flash drive. "They already believe me." She plugged it into the deputy's tablet. He watched for 20 seconds. The slap, the scream, the fall. He looked up and nodded. That's more than enough. Her father stepped forward, rage rising, but the deputy blocked him. "Sir, if you escalate, you'll be detained." Eric growled, "This is revenge. That's all this is." Jessa didn't blink. "No," she said. "This is freedom." And then, a small voice behind her, "Mom." Jessa turned. Danny stood there, tiny in her pajamas, hair tousled, eyes wide. She looked at her grandfather, then at Eric, then back at her mother, and she said quietly, clearly, "You hurt my mom. That's what ruined everything." Silence, thick and full. Even the wind seemed to stop. The deputy handed Jessa the final form. "Ma'am, the property is now officially in your possession." Her father's shoulders slumped. Eric dropped his duffel bag with a loud thud. They walked down the steps. No words. No more lies. Jessa didn't follow. She didn't watch them leave. She turned to Danny instead. Her daughter looked up and asked, "Are we safe now?" Jessa knelt, pressed her forehead to Danny's and whispered, "Yes, baby, we are." The house was hers, legally, undeniably, unshakably. But it didn't feel like home. Not anymore. Not after everything that had been said, everything that had been done within its walls. Every corner whispered old arguments. Every floorboard creaked with memories she didn't want to relive. Even the sunlight filtering through the curtains felt haunted. People asked why she didn't just renovate. "It's yours now," they said. "Why give it up after everything you fought for?" But they didn't understand. Jessa hadn't fought for the bricks. She had fought for her freedom. And now she had it. It was never about winning the house. It was about walking away from everything that once made her feel small. So she sold it. No fanfare, no goodbye tour, no dramatic speeches. Just signed the papers quietly and walked away. Because sometimes healing doesn't happen where the pain lived. Sometimes healing means starting over somewhere new. The new house was nothing fancy, just 2 bedrooms, a tiny porch, and a cluster of lavender bushes by the front gate. But to Jessa, it felt like air after drowning, like space that didn't judge, like a place where love didn't hurt. Danny picked her room instantly, the one with the window facing east. "So Bunny can wake up with the sun," she said, smiling. Every night, Danny slept soundly. No more flinching at every creak. No more whispering, "Is Grandpa mad again?" No more hiding behind doors. Just peace, safety, sleep. Jessa would sit on the edge of her bed, just listening to the rise and fall of her daughter's breathing. That rhythm was the sound of freedom. She started therapy the following week. At first, she didn't even know where to begin. How do you explain a lifetime of shrinking, of being told love came with debt, that family was something you owed, not something that lifted you? But session after session, something in her began to shift. She cried, she laughed, she forgave herself, and slowly, gently, she began to love herself for the first time in years. She wasn't rebuilding the past. She was building something better, a new home, a new heartbeat, a new version of herself, one that didn't belong to anyone else. It was a quiet morning, the kind with soft light, warm tea, and the smell of pancakes lingering in the air. Dani sat cross-legged on the kitchen stool, cradling her worn-out stuffed bunny. Her hair was still messy from sleep, her voice just above a whisper. "Mom, do you think Bunny's proud of us?" Jessa looked up from the stove. She didn't laugh. She didn't tease. She just paused, because she felt it. That question, it wasn't really about Bunny. It was about them. Jessa walked over, crouched beside her daughter, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I think," she said softly, "Bunny always knew we were stronger than we thought." Dani smiled, then went back to drawing rainbows on her napkin. Outside the window, the world was still spinning. Bills still existed, scars still ached. But inside their little home, there was no yelling, no guilt, no fists, no fear. Just a mother, a daughter, and a quiet kind of love that finally felt enough. Family isn't just where you're born. It should be the one place you feel safe coming back to. Sometimes the hardest thing to walk away from is the very thing you once called blood. You're not selfish for protecting your peace. You're not cold for leaving the people who hurt you. And you're not weak just because you're tired. True courage isn't about enduring pain. It's about standing up and saying, enough. Especially when you're doing it not just for yourself, but for a child who's watching you learn how to live. If Jessa's story moved you or reminded you of someone you know, subscribe to Athena Stories today. Here, you won't just hear stories. You'll feel them. You'll see yourself in them. And maybe, just maybe, you'll begin to heal through them. Tap subscribe because you deserve stories that are raw, real, and told straight from the heart.